Defensive line. Let's switch spots and go, Steve, to your depth chart forecast on the defensive line.
Yeah, we'll break it up into two different groups, the defensive ends and the defensive tackles. And I think you lose Jonathan Cooper, who was a starter at defensive end, along with Tyreek Smith. And starter is kind of a misnomer because the guys generally played about the same number of snaps, the key guys, the 4 or 5 key guys there at defensive end. Larry Johnson did a good job of rotating. But in terms of the game started, it was Jonathan Cooper and Tyreek Smith who seemingly started more of the games than anybody else. Then you have Zach Harrison, the junior, Tyreek Smith. He's back. I've got him down as a senior, but is he actually a junior? Am I off on that?
He's a senior.
I don't know. He's a senior.
Tyreek Smith, yeah.
Okay. Then my second team, I had Tyler Friday as a senior and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who is a junior, and I had him kind of bracketed with Jack Sawyer, who's a freshman. And then the third team, I had 3 names, Cormonte Hamilton, who's a sophomore and a convert from tight end, Darian Henry Young, who's a redshirt freshman, and Jacoby Cowan, who's also a redshirt freshman. So that kind of covered all of the defensive ends. I don't think they have anybody else coming in this summer. I think that's it. There's 3 defensive linemen coming in, yeah, and the one that's not in yet is Mike Hill. Does that sound right? And they
Streetsboro. Yeah,
Mike Hall. And they also have Tyleek Williams, and he's a tackle. So, yeah, that's the extent of it. It's not a real deep group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 names plus a walk-on. Aaron Cox, I think, might be repping there as well. So 8 names at defensive end for 2 spots. So I guess that's 4 deep at each spot. But, we need to see production. And I don't think the names really matter here. I think it's production. And I think people have hoped and said a lot of great things about Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith, and now it's time for those guys to deliver. I like Jack Sawyer. I think he's got the potential to come in and maybe be a Joey Bosa who gets to start, or, well, start may not be the right word with those upperclassmen ahead of him, but play a lot as a true freshman. And yet, as I kind of went back over and watched the spring game, I'm watching him try to go up against Thayer Munford, and Thayer Munford is just swallowing him whole. He didn't do much damage against the starting tackles. It was, later on in that scrimmage when he was getting by, some of those other guys and touch sacking the quarterbacks. So for his three sacks without wrapping anybody up. So, how that converts to real life football is probably like a buck 47 maybe or something in real money. But I don't know. I guess we'll see how he converts it and how he looks out there against the real guys, because everybody's going to have guys like Munford and Petit Ferrer, at least veterans, big guys, and is he going to get swallowed up by those guys when they get into the season for real? But I don't know. That's my take on that position. I got Harrison and Smith as my starters. Then the veterans, Friday and Jean-Baptiste behind them, with Jack Sawyer probably ahead of the rest of those guys who were already on the team last year with Hamilton, Henry Young, and Cowan.
Yeah, I'm with you on Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith as the top 2 guys. And while Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste are both 4th-year guys and they've been around, the production hasn't been there. So this is a spot where Jack Sawyer could move in there and be the number 3 guy and get in that rotation, or he could just be one of the 5, and they would all just rotate. And it's important for Ohio State that Tyler Friday and Javonte Jean-Baptiste get into the backfield more. It's probably even more important that Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison do it. Because Tyreek Smith has maybe 3 or 4 sacks in his career, and Zach Harrison, had 3.5 as a freshman, and maybe 3 last year or something like that. So they need more production. They have tons of hype. 5-star Zach Harrison, almost a 5-star Tyreek Smith, and everybody likes them, and they're all talented, and they look like this guy and they look like that guy. but if they're not getting to the quarterback, they're not as good as they should be. But I think they'll be fine. If you start doubting Larry Johnson, do it at your own peril. And then I think with the defensive tackles with Haskell Garrett and Teron Vincent, it starts there. And whether they're playing next to each other or they're rotating with each other, I think you've got an opportunity to make the interior a strength again like it was last year. But losing Tommy Togiai is going to be tough to get through at tackle. But Kevin, I think the ends will be fine, and maybe they get more out of Jack Sawyer than they've gotten out of a freshman since maybe Nick Bosa.
Yeah, there are positions where I care about talking about a depth chart, and there are positions that I don't really care as much about talking about the depth chart. And Larry Johnson's philosophy of rolling guys in and out, I think that there's, especially at end, if you can sit there and say 6, and one guy that hasn't committed anywhere yet that I think Ohio State fans certainly would like to see in that rotation is JT Tui Moloao, if I got that name right. And, he's still supposed to be taking some June visits and, could maybe be on a campus by July at that point. As we kind of have talked about in a previous show, I think it's a big asking for him to jump right in there and say, are you going to be getting, quote unquote, second team reps, which honestly, we don't see guys getting much more than 40 in Larry's system. Some guys get up to 40, 41. Some guys are in the low 20s or whatnot. But, I think especially at end, if we're talking about Harrison and we're talking about Tyreek Smith and Friday and JJB and Jack Sawyer, and whether or not that 6th guy is JTT or maybe a younger guy steps in, maybe, Darion Henry Young has the light bulb go off or Noah Potter, you just don't know. And then, moving inside to tackle, having Haskell Garrett come back is a huge addition for them, obviously. You have him, Antoine Jackson, Teron Vincent, Jerron Cage, and then, you had Jaden McKenzie, who really kind of played sparingly last year, and then you have Michael Hall coming in. So, they certainly have some guys there. They're certainly not as deep as what we were talking about on the offensive line, where the Ohio State second-team O-line might be the second best O-line in the Big Ten. I don't know if Ohio State has that depth there, but, as Tony said, wager against Larry Johnson at your own peril.
I will throw out and I would agree with Kevin's sentiment that the starter tag is kind of an antiquated notion of looking at this, although Haskell Garrett was the starter and played a lot last year. Tommy Togiai was the other starter at defensive tackle. He left early for the NFL. I think he was a 4th-round NFL draft pick, perhaps. Teron Vincent, and Garrett is a super senior, taking advantage of that extra year. What a great rule that was. And Ohio State getting some key contributors with Thayer Munford at tackle and offensive tackle, and Haskell Garrett defensive tackle. Teron Vincent is the other guy who I think most people look as the next guy up at defensive tackle, junior. Then you got Jerron Cage, who's a senior, Antoine Jackson, who's a super senior. I have them as the backups. And then the third team, I had Ty Hamilton, a sophomore, Noah Potter, a sophomore, who's kind of jockeyed between end and tackle. Tyleik Williams, a true freshman, got in there this spring. We heard a lot of great things about him. Jaden McKenzie, I'm not sure what's going on with him. I think he may have missed some time this spring due to injury. He's a sophomore. And then Mike Hall, a freshman from up in the Cleveland area. He is coming in this year as well. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys for 2 spots there. So again, you've got plenty of depth. And I was remiss in not mentioning JT Tui Moloao with the defensive ends and the potential for him to crash the 2 deep as well as the nation's number 3 overall prospect. I think Ohio State fans are hoping that he'll come to campus this June and fall in love with everything he sees and say, I want to wear the scarlet and gray. That would be huge. But, of course, Alabama and Oregon are going to make a real push on him as well. I'll throw it out there for Tony if he's got anything else on the defensive tackles that he likes. I know Kevin touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, I think I really like both Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams, and I think there's enough depth that those two guys can redshirt and just learn a bit. But I know from talking to people in the area about Mike Hall, he's a really good athlete, explosive basketball type player at 280, 290 pounds. And Tyleik Williams came in around 330, might have to drop a little bit of weight, but also a quick guy. I think maybe get them 4 games in this year, and then next year maybe set them loose, because I don't know that there's enough room for them this year, especially when you're talking about you're probably going to see a bit of the rushman package where you've got defensive ends playing inside, so there's not going to be a lot of snaps for defensive tackles throughout the season.
Steve, I would say that you can't win in that situation. If you include JTT, then people are going to say that you jumped the gun. And if you don't include him, as I know that you've heard, well, you need to include him. Where's he going to factor in?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. And I think, everyone's clamoring to find out. And, it'll happen in due time wherever he ends up. And they're going to play the football season at Ohio State, Alabama, and Oregon. And one of them will have him and the other 2 won't. And that's just the way the cookie's going to crumble. It seems like the other 2 programs are going to press ahead. They're not going to surrender their position in Cuba just because they didn't land JT Tui Moloao. So it be interesting to see what happens. But we'll take it with a grain of salt, one way or the other. Take it in stride and move on to the next stop.
You 3 have been in this game for a long, long time. I'm going to start with Kevin because of his investment in the recruiting game, because this is how it seems to me like it's going to play out. June 1st, the floodgates open. You see all these schools saying we're having all these special weekends, barbecues, and all sorts of things going on. Basically, the first 2 to 3 weekends of June. And then I got to think most of these top guys either just want that taste of the one school that they're boom, or most of them are more in the 2 to 3, 4 range where they're like, I got to get to X, Y, and Z. And then probably around the end of June into mid-July, do you expect just, wow, we're going to get slapped in the face with all sorts of commitments all over the place?
I don't think it's only going to be commitments. I think we're going to see nationally, before Ohio State fans jump off a ledge, nationally we're going to see a good amount of decommitments, because I think a lot of kids out there nationally put in their placeholder because we had no guarantees that this was going to open in June, July, August, September, whenever. So I think you're going to have kids who are going to go out, take visits, look around, see what's going on. We recently did a podcast over for Buckeye Grove on the BIA podcast, and I asked our recruiting guy, what would you put the over-under on for July or for June commitments? And he initially said 2.5, and then shortly after we got off the air, he's like, I probably should have said 4 or whatever. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of commitments happening, especially in 2022. Ohio State really hasn't started pressing for 23 yet. That could maybe start. There are a couple of in-state guys that I think that once they get on campus, because we're talking about young guys in that instance that really have never come to campus in a recruiting capacity. So I think that's all going to move quickly. But I guess getting back to the genesis of this with JTT, he's going to take his visits back to back to back to back. He's going to have to, because at some point he's going to have to show up on a campus, move into a dorm, all of that good stuff or whatnot. But yeah, buckle up. We're going to be talking a lot of recruiting throughout this industry, starting here in 12 days or whatnot. First visit weekend is June 2nd. It's going to be on, as the kids say.